Imagine coming home from a relaxing vacation, only to find that a powerful homeowners association, HOA, is trying to seize your entire 600-acre farm. What would you do if you found yourself at the mercy of their illegal power grab? Jack Whitaker, a quiet farmer, had no idea that his peaceful life was about to be turned upside down until he decided to fight back in a way no one saw coming. This is the story of how one man set a legal trap that not only saved his farm, but exposed a massive corruption ring lurking beneath the surface. The sun crept over the ridge like a golden curtain, spilling its warmth across 600 acres of dew-drenched grass and swaying pines. Jack Whitaker stood on his wraparound porch, steaming coffee in hand, boots dusty from the morning's first walk through the fields. For nearly 15 years, this land had been his world, a sprawling patch of rural Texas untouched by strip malls, traffic lights, or the grinding noise of city life. Here, time bent to the rhythm of the earth. Jack wasn't the kind of man who needed much. He woke before dawn, worked until sunset, and let the silence of the open plains fill the gaps in between. Every inch of the property, from the rust-stained windmill to the 2-century-old oak that stood like a sentinel near the creek, had his fingerprints on it. He'd rebuilt the barn himself, wired the solar panels, and even restored the old tractor that coughed like an asthmatic bull, but ran like a dream. People from town thought he was reclusive, maybe even odd. He didn't care. He'd dealt with people before, big city suits trying to buy out his land, nosy developers sniffing around with fake smiles and handshakes too firm to be sincere. They didn't understand that for Jack, this farm wasn't just dirt and grass, it was bloodline, memory, and freedom. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles out, and even they knew better than to come by uninvited. Jack liked it that way. No mailboxes cluttering the road, no barking dogs but his own, and no one telling him what color to paint his barn or how tall his grass should be. That was the thing about living far from the grid. You answered to the land, not to people. As he sipped the last of his coffee, he glanced out at the tree line. A hawk circled lazily overhead, and the horses stirred in the distance, shadows stretching beneath them. Everything was in its place. But just beneath that tranquility, something stirred, like the subtle shift of wind before a storm. Jack didn't know it yet. But while he was tending to his fields, forces beyond those pine trees were watching, waiting, and quietly drawing lines on a map that didn't belong to them. The land was quiet, but it wouldn't stay that way. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. The phone buzzed against the kitchen counter just as Jack finished marking the livestock ledger. It was his sister, Claire, again. He sighed, wiping his hands on a rag before picking up. "You're not going to dodge me this time, Jack," she said, her voice bright with the kind of cheer only suburban comfort could breed. "You've been buried out there for years. Come visit, just a week, no excuses." Jack rubbed the back of his neck, staring out the window where the horizon blazed orange. "Claire, I can't just drop everything. This isn't a weekend lawn. You've got Ben, don't you? He knows the routine, and you haven't taken a single break since Mom passed. You're going to turn into one of those old guys who talks to cows if you don't step out into the world again." He chuckled despite himself. Ben, his longtime farmhand, was reliable. More than that, he understood the land, its quirks, its patterns. If anyone could hold things down, it was him. Still, a tight knot settled in Jack's stomach. The kind that didn't come from anxiety, but instinct. That night, Jack sat in his office, poring over papers like a man preparing for war. Deeds, land surveys, tax filings. He kept them in a locked cabinet labeled, "In case of stupidity." He made sure every boundary line was crystal clear, every protective clause unbreakable. The most important one, a covenant buried deep in the records, filed years ago after a near-disastrous dispute with a land developer. It restricted jurisdictional interference and solidified the farm's independence from any homeowners association. Ironclad, bulletproof. But Jack still made 2 backup copies. The next morning, he walked the perimeter one last time with Ben. Fences. "Look good," Ben said, squinting at the northern ridge. "We still good on the west line after that runoff last spring?" "Survey's solid," Jack replied, eyes tracing the slope. "But if anything feels off, anything, you call me." Ben nodded. "You worried about something?" Jack hesitated. "No, just a feeling. Like leaving the front door open when there's a storm coming." He left before dawn the following day, windows down as he drove toward the airport. The farm disappeared behind him in the rear view, swallowed by morning fog. But back on that land, unseen by Jack, a black SUV idled just off the main road, its tinted windows reflecting the rising sun. Inside, a man in a blazer flipped through, a thin file folder marked Whitaker Property, Target Review. It started with a sign. Ben found it nailed to a fence post near the south entrance, bright red, laminated, and stamped with a logo he didn't recognize. Notice of non-compliance, subject to fines and legal action. "What in the hell?" he muttered, pulling it down and flipping it over. At the bottom was the name of an HOA, Spring Hollow Estates, along with a contact number and vague legal threats citing unauthorized agricultural activity. Ben stood there for a long moment, the paper fluttering in the breeze. Spring Hollow? That was 2 miles south. Jack's farm wasn't part of any neighborhood, much less some pre-planned community with manicured lawns and mandatory porch colors. He called Jack immediately. "You said Spring Hollow?" Jack asked, voice tightening. "Yeah, red sign. Legalese. They say we're in violation of something, but they're not even in our zoning area." Jack fell silent, the sound of traffic humming in the background. "Keep everything as is. Don't respond. Just photograph and document everything." Ben spent the next few days doing exactly that. But the HOA didn't stop. A letter came next. Official, stationary, legal jargon layered over veiled threats. It accused Jack of unregistered land use, demanded he cease all livestock operations, and warned of escalating fines. Then came the surveyors, 2 men in polos and khakis with clipboards, cameras, and high-end GPS gear. Ben watched them from the barn roof with a pair of binoculars, muttering, "You're on the wrong damn property." He snapped photos, videos, and even followed them one afternoon until they scurried off after realizing he was tailing them in Jack's old Ford. 2 days later, another sign appeared, this one inside the property line. Then came the drone. It buzzed over the northern pasture like a mechanical vulture, dipping low enough to spook the horses. Ben filed a trespassing report with the sheriff's office, but the deputy just shrugged. If it's the HOA, there might be some gray area. These organizations have been stretching their reach lately. Stretching their reach? No, they were trying to choke the life out of the farm while Jack was gone. Back in Arizona, Jack sat on Claire's patio with the HOA letter in his lap and a cold dread in his chest. He'd dealt with developers, bureaucrats. But this? This was different. The moves were fast, quiet, and calculated. Jack opened his laptop and pulled up a copy of the land deed. Every protective clause was still there. Every survey line held. He hadn't made a mistake. Then why were they acting like they owned the place? He clicked through public zoning maps. That's when he saw it. Spring Hollow's updated boundary lines, freshly submitted, and now overlapping the northeast edge of his land by just enough to cause chaos. Jack's jaw clenched. They think I'm not watching. But he was. And now he was documenting everything. They had made their first move. Now it was his turn to counter. Ben's voice came through the phone, ragged and tight. "Jack, you need to come back. Something's not right out here." Jack stood at the edge of a desert hiking trail in Arizona, the phone pressed tight against his ear, his breath caught somewhere between concern and fury. "Slow down! What happened?" "They were back," Ben hissed. "Two guys in suits this time. HOA reps or contractors, whatever they were. They came onto the property without permission. Said you'd been notified of non-compliance, and if it didn't get handled soon, they'd initiate repossession procedures. Their words, not mine." Jack's heart thudded. "Repossession? They can't repossess what they don't own." "That's not even the worst part," Ben continued. "They walked the north fence line like they were inspecting it, taking photos, pointing out stuff. One of them said something about establishing right of entry. I told him to get off your land or I'd call the sheriff. You know what they said?" "What?" "They said they were working with the sheriff's office." Jack's stomach dropped. He knew the county well enough to doubt that, knew most of the deputies by name, but this was escalating faster than he expected. He kept his voice steady. "Did you record any of it?" Ben exhaled. "Yeah, I had my phone running. Got the whole conversation and their faces on camera. I also snapped their license plate." "Good," Jack said, already walking back toward Claire's house. "Keep that footage secure. Upload a backup to the cloud. From now on, record everything. Anyone steps foot on that land, you document it like it's evidence. Because it is." That night, Jack set up an encrypted folder and began gathering everything. Photos of the signs, scanned letters, copies of the original deed, even time-stamped weather data to prove foot traffic. His vacation had turned into a digital war room. Morning. The trespass had escalated again. "They brought a backhoe," Ben said in the next call. "They were staking out a corner of the south pasture. Said it was preparation for compliance restoration." Jack's jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. "They're laying groundwork, testing boundaries, seeing how far they can go, before someone pushes back." "They're pushing hard, Jack, real hard." Jack stared at his laptop screen, a digital map of his property glowing in the dark room. One corner had just barely been included in Spring Hollow's redrawn boundaries, but it was enough to give the HOA a pretense, a lie wrapped in legal misdirection. He clicked on a folder labeled Covenant Defense Protocols, something he hadn't opened in years. Let them keep pushing, he thought. They had no idea what kind of trap they were walking into. Jack Whitaker didn't trust paper walls. Not after what happened to his neighbor Carl Massey 10 years ago. Carl's 300-acre orchard had been carved up overnight, half of it absorbed by an expanding HOA, the other half swallowed by tax penalties and shady zoning loopholes. By the time Carl realized what was happening, bulldozers were already on his land, and his orchard was gone within a month. Jack had watched from the sidelines, fists clenched, jaw grinding. He remembered thinking, "That'll never happen to me. Not here." So he went to work. He hired a land use attorney from Austin, one who specialized in agricultural exemptions and anti-annexation strategies. They spent 6 months combing through regional policies, zoning overlays, and obscure HOA charters that had slowly morphed from neighborhood watch groups into private governments with unchecked power. Then Jack drafted something rare, something powerful. It was called a Restrictive Agricultural Covenant Agreement, filed under a shell trust he quietly created to manage the land's legal identity. It not only severed his property from future residential zoning overlays, but also barred any external association, including HOAs, from exerting legal influence over land use, property taxation, or right-of-way claims. In short, his farm was a legal fortress. Better still, Jack had embedded an automatic litigation trigger. If any organization attempted to assert false jurisdiction, the trust's legal counsel, on retainer, silent, and waiting, would be alerted through a monitoring clause linked to public filing activity. Most wouldn't even notice they'd set off a trap until it was too late. The brilliance? Jack didn't advertise any of this. There were no flashy signs, no protected property warnings. Just quiet paperwork, expertly buried in county archives, under obscure file extensions, documents that looked too boring for anyone without a law degree to bother reading. Now back in Claire's guest room, Jack opened a secure portal and read the automated alert. Boundary reassessment detected. External authority filing, Spring Hollow Estates, HOA. Trigger initiated, Section 3.2 violation, unlawful jurisdiction claim. They stepped on the tripwire, he thought. The next file opened was a notification to the HOA's own legal insurance provider, informing them of pending litigation against their client for property interference, falsified jurisdiction claims, and attempted hostile acquisition. The fine print spelled out everything. $250,000 in damages per infraction. They thought he was a backwoods farmer with a tattered ball cap and a rusty truck. But Jack had built a legal minefield beneath their feet. He called Ben. "They're going to feel the bite soon." "You going nuclear?" Ben asked, cautiously hopeful. "Not yet," Jack replied, his voice calm but cold. "But I just released the leash. The lawyers are coming, and they're not wearing suits from Walmart." Outside, the sun dipped low over the desert hills, casting long shadows across Claire's backyard. Jack stared at the horizon, every inch of him alert. Let them keep coming, he thought. They don't know this war started a decade ago. Jack didn't announce his return. No calls, no warning. Just a quiet flight, a rented pickup, and a long brooding drive back to his land. The familiar smell of pine and tilled earth hit him like a jolt as he turned onto the gravel road leading to the farmhouse. But something was off. Wrong angles in the skyline, like scars that hadn't been there before. As he crested the hill, near the south pasture, the sight stopped him cold. A new chain-link fence was being erected, driven right through his property like a dividing knife. Men in reflective vests were hammering poles into the soil, following spray-painted lines that Jack hadn't authorized. A sign stood at the edge of the work zone. Future Community Access Easement, Spring Hollow, HOA Development Plan. Phase 1. Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't slam the brakes. He kept driving slowly, nodding to the crew like just another neighbor. His weathered Stetson, travel dust, and calm face sold the illusion. Just a farmer coming home. He parked near the barn and found Ben waiting, arms crossed, face drawn tight. "They started this morning," Ben said, nodding toward the construction. "Didn't even blink when I told them they had no right." "They're bluffing," Jack said, his eyes never leaving the workers. "But we're not." He took out his phone, filming quietly from the window, panning from the fencing crew to the HOA rep in a navy blazer barking into a headset. Jack recognized him. He was the one in the SUV weeks ago. Arrogant, oblivious, and about to be blindsided. Jack stepped out of the truck, drawing the rep's attention. "Afternoon," Jack said with a disarming grin. "Mind telling me what's going on?" The rep blinked. "Mr. Whitaker? We assumed you were out of state. The HOA is enforcing new development parameters per revised jurisdiction boundaries." "Oh?" Jack said, scratching his head. "Must have missed that memo?" His voice was casual, but his eyes were sharp, cold steel behind a smile. The man handed him a packet of documents, thick with bluff and boilerplate. Jack accepted it politely. Every second was being recorded. Every word, every facial twitch. "Thanks," Jack said, folding the packet. "I'll look it over." But what he meant was, "This is your last move." Jack turned back to the house as storm clouds gathered over the ridge. The game was over. Now came the reckoning. The courtroom wasn't large, just a plain wood-paneled chamber tucked behind the county clerk's office. But to Jack, it might as well have been the battlefield. His boots echoed against the floor as he entered, documents tucked neatly under one arm, and his lawyer, Dinah Roth, cool and composed at his side. Across the room, The HOA's attorney, slick-suited and smirking, thumbed through a binder as if victory were already guaranteed. Jack said nothing. He didn't need to. The trap had already been set. The judge, an older man named Harold Spence, adjusted his glasses as he glanced over the docket. His tone was brisk. "Mr. Whitaker, Ms. Roth, Mr. Braden representing the Spring Hollow Estates?" Braden, the HOA's attorney, rose first. "Your Honor, we're here today to request judicial validation of our jurisdictional claim over Mr. Whitaker's land pursuant to updated boundary filings and recent annexation measures." "Sit down," Judge Spence interrupted flatly. Braden blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said, sit down, Mr. Braden." "I've seen enough." Dana arched a brow and gave Jack the smallest of nods. The judge turned to Jack, his voice now steady but carrying the weight of long familiarity. "Mr. Whitaker, I remember when you filed that restrictive covenant nearly 10 years ago. I was on the bench then, too. You went through the full process, submitted supplemental trust documentation, and even held an open hearing to establish agricultural sovereignty for that parcel. I remember because it was damn near the most ironclad land use protection I've ever seen." A silence fell over the room, Spence continued, his eyes now locking on Braden. "Spring Hollow Estates has no jurisdiction over Mr. Whitaker's land. Not now, not ever. Their annexation filings conflict with state zoning laws and violate multiple sections of the Agricultural Land Use Preservation Act." Jack's heart beat like a war drum in his chest, but he kept his face impassive. The judge flipped through a few more pages. "Furthermore, their encroachment, fencing, and attempted seizure border on criminal trespass. I'm referring this to the district attorney's office for review," Braden stammered. "Your Honor, surely you'll need a better defense," Spence snapped. "Because what you've done isn't just illegal, it's arrogant." Dana Roth leaned toward Jack and whispered, "Checkmate." As the gavel slammed down, Jack exhaled for the first time in days. Outside the courthouse, cameras from local news crews were already waiting. Jack ignored them. He didn't come for fame. He came for justice. And now, the real fallout was just beginning. The aftermath of the court ruling rippled through the local community like a storm. The HOA, once a formidable force, was in tatters. News outlets covered the story for days. Local farmer defeats HOA in landmark legal battle. But the real punch came when the district attorney's office launched a full investigation into Spring Hollow Estates. The board members, arrogant, untouchable, were not only fined heavily for their illegal land grabs, but several were arrested for corrupt practices, falsifying records, and even laundering HOA dues for personal profit. The headlines were brutal. The HOA's credibility was shattered overnight. People who once feared their reach now saw them for what they truly were, nothing more than a glorified cartel. And as for Jack, he became a local hero. Word spread fast. Neighbors, many of whom had lived in quiet fear of the HOA, came forward, offering their support, their stories, their gratitude. Jack was no longer just the farmer down the road. He was a symbol of resistance. His phone rang constantly with offers for interviews, with thank yous, and with requests for help from others facing similar battles. But he declined every offer. Jack wasn't in it for the fame. Still, the ripple effect continued to grow. The state legislature quickly took notice. Talk of HOA reform spread through the halls of government. What had once been a small, legal victory had sparked a fire that reached far beyond Jack's farm. A wave of scrutiny washed over HOA practices across the state. New laws were drafted, ones that gave homeowners more power, more protection. But the final twist? Jack's legal trap had done more than just defend his property. It had exposed a vast corruption network buried deep within the HOA structure itself. Documents uncovered during the investigation revealed that Spring Hollow Estates had been laundering money for years, inflating fees, and pushing fake development projects. Jack leaned back against the porch railing, watching the sun sink. Behind the hills, his fight had been for his land, but it turned into something much larger, a fight for every landowner who had ever been pushed around. Justice had come, and it had come for all of them. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next one. Your support means the world.